The air was heavy with incense and iron dust. Beneath the sacred banners of the Imperium, men prayed not for victory, but for survival. The sky above the walls of Helios Primus burned like the memory of a god who had turned away. The sound of the vox was a hymn of static and despair. Somewhere beyond the ash horizon, something vast moved in silence. There were stories, whispered by the dying, of flesh the size of mountains, of walls built not from stone, but from fear. And within those walls, the last of humanity knelt before an emperor who had not spoken for 10,000 years. Some said the Titans were punishment, manifestations of sin, born from the warp's reflection of man's arrogance. Others believed they were his angels, sent to test the faith of the lost. No one knew the truth, but all felt the tremor when they walked. Before we descend further into this forgotten faith, remember to join us so that our stories may never fade into silence. The city of Helios Primus was built in the shadow of extinction. Its walls stretched for miles, forged of adamantium and ancient faith, a barrier between the last remnants of mankind and the void-born horrors that roamed beyond. To the people who lived beneath those walls, the sky was not a promise, but a wound, perpetually bleeding light through the smog of endless manufactoria. Every dawn began the same. The bells of the ecclesiarchal towers rang with mechanical precision, echoing through the rusted canyons of habitation blocks. Vox speakers recited the morning benedictions. By the Emperor's light we endure. Yet for those who listened closely, the words felt hollow. The ration lines grew longer each day, and, somewhere beyond the gates, something vast breathed in the mist. In the barracks along the eastern wall, Guardsman Iran Kalar adjusted his rebreather and stared at the horizon through a crack in the armor glass. The dawn was not golden, but red, painted by promethium fires smoldering in the wasteland beyond. He could not remember the last time he had seen an unburned sky. "Do you think he still watches?" murmured a voice behind him. It was Terran, the youngest of the squad, barely 16 and already carrying the stare of a man thrice his age. His last gun trembled slightly in his hands. Iran didn't turn. If he does, he's quiet about it. They both watched as the morning mist shifted like a living thing. For a heartbeat, Iran thought he saw movement, something immense and slow, like the earth itself exhaling. Then the fog closed again, and the world was still. The Titans were a rumor for most, but not for those who had seen the breaches. Flesh like molten wax, eyes that reflected nothing, and teeth large enough to crush a chimera tank. They were not Xenos. They were not machines. They were something else. The priests said they were manifestations of divine wrath, given form by mankind's loss of faith. The soldiers said nothing. They simply aimed higher. Aaron tightened his grip on the rifle and forced the thought away. Faith was a currency too rare to spend on doubt. But the silence of the Emperor, 10 millennia of silence, had begun to rot the soul of the Imperium, one believer at a time. The Vox crackled. Outer patrols report seismic disturbance at Quadrant 47. Wall teams, maintain readiness. That was the code. Disturbance meant tremor. Tremor meant something was walking. Aaron and Terran exchanged a glance. The faint tremor beneath their boots confirmed it, the deep, rhythmic thud that no artillery could mimic. Somewhere far beyond the haze, the Titans were stirring again. The squads moved in disciplined silence. The walls of Helios groaned as the defense cannons activated, their machine spirits waking with low metallic growls. Pilgrims knelt in the streets, clutching icons of the emperor, whispering prayers that the walls would hold once more. Beneath the vox grill of his helmet, Erend whispered too, not to the emperor, but to the memory of his sister, lost in the last breach. "If you can hear me," he murmured, "keep the gate closed." The first sound was not a roar, but a breath, and massive intake of air that made the banners ripple along the ramparts. Then the world shook. The outer wasteland split open as a colossal silhouette rose from the dust. Its flesh was pale, like marble corrupted by time. Its eyes burned with a dull inner glow, as if lit from within by sorrow. Every step it took brought the sound of thunder and bones breaking in the distance. The Titans never ran. They didn't need to. "Wall sighting confirmed," came the vox. "Designation, type Theta. Prepare counterfire." From the wall bastions, the massive macro cannons roared to life, sending streams of plasma into the fog. The night lit up in blue-white arcs, burning away the mist for a moment, and there it was, a humanoid shape of impossible scale, stripped of reason, its muscles twitching as if in eternal agony. It bore no armor, no weapon, yet its presence alone tore sanity from the men who beheld it. Erend felt his knees weaken. The sight was holy and profane all at once, like glimpsing a god's corpse still walking. "Fire!" The order echoed, and the heavens answered. Lances of searing plasma and autocannon rounds tore into the Titan's chest. Chunks of steaming flesh erupted, only for the wounds to knit back together with a grotesque shimmer. The creature's mouth opened, not in pain, but in something that sounded disturbingly like song. A deep, resonant hum that reverberated in the skull and shook loose tears from the eyes. Erend realized with horror what he was hearing. It wasn't roaring, it was praying.
He turned toward Terran, but the boy was on his knees, bleeding from the nose, his rebreather fogged. "Make it stop," he gasped. "Saints, make it stop!" The Titan's voice swelled until the air itself vibrated. All along the wall, men clutched their helmets, their eyes wide with terror. Some screamed, others began to recite scripture through clenched teeth as if words alone could anchor their minds. And then, through the chaos, Erend heard another sound, the shriek of bending metal. A section of the outer gate was collapsing. "No," he breathed, rushing to the parapet's edge. Through the smoke and flame he saw it, the eastern gate, the last barrier of Helios, cracking open like a wound. A flood of defenders surged toward the breach. Commissars shouted orders, drowned by the roar of engines. Sentinel walkers sprinted into the smoke, their multi-lasers flaring like candles in a hurricane. And then, from the fog, a hand the size of a cathedral reached through the breach, flesh steaming, fingers curling. It gripped the wall. Stone screamed, metal shattered. The gate of Helios broke. The Titan's head rose above the parapet now, expressionless and blind, yet somehow aware. For a heartbeat, Erend thought it looked not at them, but through them, as if gazing into a truth too immense for human eyes. He fired. Everyone fired. The air became fire and thunder, but still the Titan climbed. Erend fell to his knees as the tremors grew. For the first time, he felt his faith crack, not in the Emperor, but in the walls that men had built to reach him. Beneath the thunder and screaming vox, a single voice whispered through the static. It was calm, human. "Do not fear the walls fall, child. Fear what comes after." Erend froze. The voice wasn't from the Vox network. It was inside his helmet, inside his mind. And then, before he could answer, the upper parapet exploded. A shockwave hurled him backward into the dust, and for an instant he saw the impossible, the Titan bowing its head as if in reverence before stepping fully into the city.
Helios had fallen. But amid the ruin and fire, something else stirred, a presence that was not Titan nor man. It was small, human-sized, standing amid the smoke, untouched by debris, its skin glowing faintly like molten gold beneath the soot. It looked up at the Titan, and the Titan hesitated. The child raised its hand, and the air trembled. The dust hung like a prayer half-spoken, suspended between ruin and revelation. The world was fire, yet, at its center, the child stood untouched. The glow from its skin was not blinding, but sacred, soft and unbearable all at once, as though it carried the light of Terra itself. Aaron coughed blood into his rebreather, dragging himself upright. His ears rang with static and screams. The eastern wall was gone. The gate, once a monument of faith and pharaohcrete, now lay twisted beneath the Titan's shadow like broken scripture. The creature's massive form loomed above, shrouded in a burning fog. Its chest rose and fell with the rhythm of a heartbeat that seemed to echo across the entire city, and yet it had stopped moving. Its enormous eyes, white and endless, were fixed on the figure standing below. The child raised its hand, and a hum filled the air. Not mechanical, not warp-born, but something deeper. The flames bent around it, as though drawn into the gravity of a miracle. Even the Titan's song faltered, its vast mouth closing with a sound like thunder's sigh. The city fell silent, and in that silence, the child spoke. Stop. One word.
Aaron stared, wide-eyed. "Emperor, protect us," he whispered. The child turned slowly, its eyes reflecting the fire like liquid gold. It was no older than 10, hair blackened by soot, face streaked with ash and blood. Yet carved into its flesh, from neck to chest, was the unmistakable mark of the imperial Aquila. Not tattooed, not burned, grown. Every guardsman who saw it fell to their knees. Even the commissars, those unbending arbiters of the creed, lowered their gaze. "Is it him?" someone whispered through the vox. "Has the emperor returned?" Aaron wanted to answer, but the truth twisted in his gut like a blade. He had seen paintings of the emperor, holy depictions etched in gold and stained glass. This was not that. This child's gaze was too human, too sorrowful. The Titan let out a low moan, the sound of air leaving something immense and dying. Its flesh began to blister, steam rising from its wounds as cracks of light formed along its body. And then, with the slow inevitability of dawn, it began to kneel. Metal trembled, stone cracked. The ground shook beneath the weight of submission. The creature bowed before the child. No one spoke, only the crackle of distant fires and the faint hum in the air, as though reality itself were listening. Then the child looked toward the soldiers, eyes glowing faintly from within. "Do not fear," it said. "This one remembers." The words echoed strangely, half heard in the ears, half felt in the soul. The Titan shuddered, its vast body collapsing inward as light consumed it. When the radiance faded, only ash remained, scattered by the wind. The defenders of Helios stared in disbelief. The impossible had happened. A Titan, one of the walking cathedrals of death, had obeyed. Aaron stumbled closer, stopping only a few meters from the child. What are you?" he asked, voice trembling through the vox. The child tilted its head, as if pondering the question. "A remembrance," it said, "of what you once were, of what you still could be." Its gaze drifted upward, to the broken wall and the red-blood sky beyond. "They will come again," it whispered, almost to itself. For every wall man builds, the warp sends another hunger. Aaron followed the gaze. The horizon trembled with distant shapes, silhouettes moving like giants in the fog. Not one, not two, dozens. The child turned back toward him, and for an instant Aaron saw something in its eyes that terrified him more than the Titans had ever had. Recognition. As if it had seen him before. "Your faith has not been forgotten," it said softly. "Only tested." Then, before he could speak, the air around the child shimmered. Light folded inward, twisting the dust into spirals. In an instant, it was gone, leaving only silence and the faint scent of ozone behind. Aaron fell to his knees, his body trembling. Around him, the soldiers began to murmur prayers, old litanies that had not been spoken aloud in generations. Some wept, others simply stared at the empty space where the miracle had been. The Vox crackled to life again, broken by static. "All units, regroup! The Emperor has answered! The gate still stands!" But Aaron knew that wasn't true. The gate was gone. The wall was gone. And something had stepped through that no man could ever understand. As the night fell, he climbed the ruined parapet and looked beyond the horizon. The fog was alive with movement, massive, slow, and countless. The Titans were gathering, and somewhere out there, in the ash and dark, a child walked alone toward them. Aaron whispered a prayer, though he no longer knew who he was praying to. The wall's lights flickered once, then died. The city slept beneath the broken sky. Night fell like a confession. The flames along the ruins dimmed to embers, their glow trembling against the wounded stone. The once glorious citadel of Helios lay silent now, a graveyard of devotion and steel. Smoke rose in slow ribbons toward the heavens, where the stars were drowned beneath the haze of war. Aaron sat upon the shattered parapet, helmet off, eyes raw from dust and grief. The cold wind from beyond the wall tasted of promethium and burnt prayer. He could hear the distant hymns of the ecclesiarchy echoing through the ruins below, their voices cracked and desperate. "He is the light! He is the shield! He is the breath!" Yet even as they sang, Aaron felt an emptiness deep within him, a space where faith had once lived, now filled with questions too dangerous to speak aloud. He had seen the child, he had seen a Titan kneel, and still the world bled. Below, the wounded were gathered in the plaza once used for parades of victory. The medici tents overflowed, their walls pulsing with the faint light of cogitators struggling to function. The smell of burned flesh hung over everything, sweet and unbearable. Terran lay among the wounded, his arm gone, his eyes open and staring at the sky as if searching for the hand that had nearly crushed them. When Aaron found him, the boy smiled faintly. "It looked at me," Terran whispered. "The Titan, before it stopped. It was crying." Aaron knelt beside him, unable to answer. "Do you think," Terran continued, his voice barely a breath, "the Emperor remembers what it means to cry?" Aaron pressed a trembling hand against the boy's chest. "Rest now," he said. "We'll rebuild the wall." But even as he said it, he felt the lie twist in his mouth. There would be no rebuilding. Not this time. The wall was gone, and something greater than stone had fallen with it. A sound rose from the void beyond the ruins, a deep vibration, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The ground trembled once, then again. But this was no Titan's march. It was slower, older, as though the very world were shifting in its sleep. Aaron turned toward the breach. The horizon shimmered faintly, and through the smoke came a faint golden light. For a moment, he thought it was dawn. Then he saw the shapes, massive silhouettes, walking side by side through the fog. Titans, dozens of them, moving in unison. But they did not roar. They did not attack. They walked in silence. And between their towering forms, far below, a single figure glowed, small, human, radiant. The child. It was walking toward the horizon, and the Titans followed, like penitents, in a holy procession.
Aaron's breath caught in his throat. The scene was terrible and beautiful all at once. The monsters of humanity's nightmares now moving like worshippers behind a single mortal light. He reached for his vox but hesitated. What would he say? That salvation had come in the form of a child who commanded the warp with a word. That the Emperor's will had taken flesh again and the Titans were kneeling to it. Or that perhaps, in humanity's deepest fear, something else had answered. The thought struck him like cold iron. What if this was not the Emperor's mercy, but his shadow? What if the child was the echo of a god too long silent, an echo that had learned to speak? The tremors faded as the procession vanished into the dark. The fires of Helios burned low, leaving behind only whispers carried by the wind. Aaron stood alone on the broken wall, his rifle forgotten beside him. He looked toward the emptiness beyond the breach, then up at the heavens. The stars were faint, distant, almost ashamed to witness what had come to pass. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer, not for victory, but for understanding. "Emperor," he said softly, "if this is your doing, forgive us. If it is not, then forgive yourself." The words were stolen by the wind. Behind him, the vox came alive once more, a voice distant and distorted. "All surviving units prepare for evacuation to the inner sanctum. The city is compromised. The Titans march east. Repeat, east, toward the shrine world of Elils." Aaron opened his eyes. The shrine world. The holiest place this side of Terra itself. And the child was leading the Titans there? He turned away from the ruins, descending the shattered steps. The fires reflected off his armor, flickering like fading candles. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him, the soldier, the believer, had already decided. He would follow. Not as a warrior, but as a witness. If this was faith reborn, or its final death, he would see it with his own eyes. The gates of Helios lay in ruin behind him, but the world ahead pulsed with terrible promise. The wind howled through the broken city, carrying with it the faint echo of the Titan's prayer song, now changed, softer, almost human. And as Aaron vanished into the smoke, a final ember fell from the sky, landing upon the ashes like a single tear. It hissed, flared briefly, and went dark. The light faded, but the prayer continued. Dawn did not return to Helios. The sun was a pale, smothered ghost behind a sky of dust and ruin. Those who survived the fall spoke little, their words thin as breath through cracked lips. The city's vox towers were silent now, their machine spirits dead or fled. Only the wind spoke, carrying the echo of the Titan's departure, a sound that trembled through every wall and bone, a hymn to something older than hope. Aaron Kalar walked through the aftermath like a pilgrim through a tomb. His armor was scorched, his faith worn to ash. Around him, the survivors gathered what they could: ration crates, last cells, scraps of relics torn from collapsed shrines. The banners of the Imperium, once bright with gold, lay buried beneath rubble and blood. The commissariat had already begun its work. They herded the wounded into the manufactoria's lower levels, not for mercy, but for containment. The priests of the ecclesiarchy whispered litanies over the dying, though their voices broke halfway through each verse.
And still, in the midst of all this despair, there were those who spoke of the child. They called him the luminous saint, the voice of the emperor, the golden remnant. Aaron called him something else, the impossible. He had followed the Titan's trail through the ash dunes eastward, far beyond the safety of Helios's ruins. Days bled into one another as the horizon pulsed with distant flashes of light. Each night he saw them, massive silhouettes moving across the plains like mountains in motion, their flesh glowing faintly in the darkness. And always, at the center of their formation, a single light moved with purpose. The child was leading them. But to where? Aaron's boots sank into the scorched dust as he crested a ridge. Before him stretched the Wound of Enoch, a wasteland where the surface had cracked open during the early wars of colonization. Miles of chasms and twisted rock, steam rising like incense from the planet's deep veins. Beyond that, on the horizon, the faint glimmer of something metallic shimmered through the haze. A manufactorum, perhaps, or the ruins of a shrine.
He lowered his scope. No, this was different. The light was alive, flickering with a rhythm not of industry, but of breath. Then he saw it, the first of the bodies. Titans, kneeling in silence, their colossal forms half buried in the ash, not fallen in battle, resting. Dozens of them, their skin cooled to a marble pallor, eyes closed as if in prayer. Around their feet grew strange metallic spines curling upward like vines seeking the sun. Aaron approached cautiously, his lasgun raised, though the gesture felt absurd beside such immensity. The air shimmered faintly near the Titan's flesh, distorting the light. He reached out and felt warmth, not the heat of decay, but the gentle pulse of something living. And then he heard it, whispers. Countless whispers, too soft to understand, yet unmistakably human. They came from the Titans themselves, voices trapped in flesh that had forgotten its shape. He stepped back, heart pounding. The ecclesiarchs had always claimed the Titans were divine punishments, avatars of the Emperor's wrath. But this felt different, closer. A memory, perhaps. He turned as his vox clicked suddenly to life. Static, then a voice. Guardsman Kalar, you are trespassing on restricted coordinates. Identify yourself. Aaron froze. The voice was formal, cold, and unmistakably from high command. He tapped his earpiece. This is Kalar, 7th Helios Infantry. Helios is gone. I'm tracking the anomaly east. Repeat, multiple Titan entities inactive. No hostile signs. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, tighter. Fall back immediately. You are entering sanctum territory. Do not engage, do not approach. Orders from Segmentum Command. Sanctum, Aaron muttered. There's nothing out here for 100 clicks. Silence. Then a whisper under the static, one not from the vox at all. You've already approached. The world tilted, the horizon rippled like heat mirage. For a brief dizzying instant, he saw the wasteland breathe. The Titan's still forms exhaled clouds of dust, and something vast stirred beneath the earth. The child's voice echoed again, soft but infinite. You seek to understand the veil, soldier. Then step through it. Aaron fell to his knees as light erupted from the fissures around him. The ground split open, not with force, but with invitation. From the cracks rose tendrils of radiant mist, wrapping around his armor, seeping through every seam. He tried to move, to scream, but the sound died in his throat. And then, for a heartbeat, he saw everything. The Titans were not beasts, not constructs. They were echoes, reflections of humanity's collective fear, drawn from the warp's mirror of the soul. Each one was born from despair, from the unspoken terror of extinction. The more mankind prayed for salvation,
the deeper their shadow became. He saw soldiers kneeling in broken cathedrals, their tears becoming sinew. He saw priests whose faith curdled into hunger, their prayers molding into flesh that climbed from the abyss. He saw the emperor, not as a god, but as a wound, endlessly bleeding faith into a universe that could never be filled. And through it all, the child's voice spoke, gentle as a lullaby. The flesh beyond the veil is not your enemy, Aaron Kalar. It is you. The vision broke. Aaron gasped as he fell onto the ash, his armor searing with cold. The fissures closed and the light died. Around him, the Titans remained still, but now their faces seemed different, softer, almost peaceful. He looked at his hands. His skin beneath the gloves glowed faintly, veins pulsing with golden light. "No! No, Emperor! No!" he whispered. The vox crackled again. "Kalar, report." He raised the transmitter slowly. I've seen the veil." His voice trembled. "And it's made of us." Static answered him. Then the transmission cut. He was alone. Above, the first Titan opened its eyes.
The Titan's eye opened like the dawn of a false sun. Its iris was not color, but motion, a swirling galaxy of gold and crimson light, endless and alive. Aaron could not move. His body trembled, each heartbeat a hammer striking against his ribs. He wanted to run, to hide behind faith and metal, but the gaze held him. The creature did not rise. It simply watched, and for a moment Aaron felt the terrible certainty that it saw through him, not his armor, not his flesh, but his soul. Then came the voice, not from the Titan's mouth, but from the air itself, vibrating within his chest. "Why do you fear what you have made?" Aaron fell to his knees, clutching his ears, though the sound was not sound at all. I don't understand," he gasped. "You prayed for strength. You begged for salvation. You built walls to hold your fear, and when your fear grew too large, you gave it my name." The Titan's form shifted, its colossal chest splitting open like a cathedral door. Light poured forth, not warm, but cold, sterile, divine. Inside, Aaron saw shapes moving, too small and too human to belong within that vastness. Faces formed in the light, thousands of them, mouths moving in silent unity. They were people, or what was left of them. The realization struck him like lightning. The Titans were not creatures born from nothing. They were the fusion of humanity's own psychic detritus, fragments of souls, lost prayers, echoes of belief devoured by the warp and reshaped into flesh. They were mankind's mirror, a reflection of its own divine longing gone mad. Aaron's breath caught in his throat as one of the faces within the light turned toward him, and he recognized it. Terran. The boy's eyes were calm now, free of pain. "You didn't fail me," his lips mouthed soundlessly. "I was already here." Aaron stumbled backward, choking on disbelief. "No," he whispered. "You died. All faith dies, but nothing sacred ever leaves. It is reborn as flesh." The fissures around Aaron blazed again, releasing waves of light that rippled across the wasteland. The other Titans stirred, their bodies shivering like mountains in the wind. Across their skin, symbols began to glow. Not the aquila, but something older, a sigil of two suns entwined, burning at the edges of comprehension. He heard chanting then, human voices, faint at first, then swelling into a dreadful chorus. He turned and saw them, figures approaching across the plain, cloaked in gray and gold, faces hidden behind mirrored masks. Each carried a censer filled with burning incense, the smoke forming tendrils that seemed to caress the Titan's feet. At their head walked a figure draped in black robes, the hem trailing across the ash like a shadow of authority. When it spoke, even the wind fell silent. "Stand, guardsmen of Helios." Erend obeyed before he realized he had moved. The figure's mask reflected his own face back at him, fractured, blood-stained, trembling. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice breaking. "We are the Ordo Sepulchrum, keepers of the threshold, custodians of what mankind was never meant to remember." Erend's pulse thundered in his skull. The threshold? "The veil between man and his reflection," the masked priest replied. "Between faith and its consequence. You have stepped beyond it." The others around him began to chant, their words a blend of high Gothic and something older, syllables that scraped against the edges of sanity. The air shimmered, the Titans lowered their heads as if in obedience. The lead priest extended a gloved hand. "The child has opened the path," he said. "You will follow him. You will bear witness to the reconciliation." Erend hesitated. "The child, what is he?" For a moment, the priest was silent. When he finally spoke, it was with reverence and dread. "He is the echo of the throne, the memory of the emperor's grief, given flesh through prayer and blasphemy alike. When the emperor died, part of him bled into the warp, and the warp remembered." Erend shook his head, refusing the words, even as he felt their truth. "That's heresy."
The priest's mask tilted slightly. So was creation. He turned, gesturing toward the horizon where the Titans had marched. "Go, Erend Kalar. The child walks toward Elis, where the Emperor's heart once burned brightest. When he arrives, the veil will rend completely. All faith will either ascend or feed the flesh. And if I refuse?" The priest's mirrored mask reflected the storm of dust around them, the endless line of kneeling Titans. "Then you will pray for refusal to matter." The chanting rose again, and the priest's form blurred into the haze. The others followed, dissolving into the dust like smoke caught in wind. Erend stood alone once more. The Titans around him stirred again, but this time they began to move. Slow, deliberate, reverent. Their steps shook the earth, each one a heartbeat in the veins of the world. And above them all, at the edge of the horizon, a faint golden light flickered. The child was still walking. Erend tightened his grip on his rifle, though he knew it was a meaningless comfort. "If this is the Emperor's will, then let me see the end of it." He began to walk after the procession, one man chasing the steps of gods born from man's own terror. Behind him, the Titan's prayer song began anew. It was no longer sorrowful. It was joyous, exultant. And in that terrible joy, Erend realized what the song meant. They were not marching to destroy. They were marching home. Erend walked for days, though time had lost all meaning. The ash dunes stretched endless and pale beneath a bruised sky. The Titan silhouettes loomed on the horizon like walking mountains, their steps echoing in the marrow of the world. Sometimes he thought he heard them whisper, faint, fractured syllables that wove together in hymns of longing and loss. At night, he camped among the bones of old manufactoria, their chimneys jutting from the sand like the ribs of fallen giants. Sleep brought no rest. In his dreams, the child's voice returned, soft, mournful, patient. "You still think of faith as a wall," it said, "but faith was never meant to protect you.
it was meant to break you open. He woke each morning with that sentence burning in his skull. He walked until his legs bled, his breath rasping inside the rebreather like prayer through rust. On the third day, the storm came. A wind rose from the horizon, thick with dust and static, glowing faintly with the iridescent hue of the warp. The Titans slowed, their enormous heads turning toward the tempest. Aaron felt it before he saw it, a pressure in his bones, a tremor in his mind, as though something vast and ancient was pushing through reality itself. Lightning struck the dunes in arcs of violet fire. The air screamed. Then, through the swirling dust, shapes emerged, towering forms not of flesh, but of metal and decay. Necron. Their skeletal legions advanced in silence, green energy pulsing through their eyes like the memory of a dead sun. Gauss flares crackled across the plain, tearing through ash and air alike. The Titans staggered beneath the onslaught, their flesh burning, their song breaking into cries of rage and pain. Aaron dove behind the wreckage of an old sentinel, gripping his rifle in futility. "No, no, no," he muttered. The ground trembled as a Necron monolith descended from the clouds above, its shadow cutting across the world like a tomb closing. He'd heard rumors back in Helios of ancient sleepers buried beneath the crust, machines older than humanity's first prayer. But to see them now, rising in answer to the Titans' march, was to witness apocalypse made scripture. The Titans roared, and their voices tore holes in the storm. One by one, they charged, their massive limbs crushing the ground in explosions of dust. Flesh met metal. Warp met logic. Divine madness collided with perfect silence. The world became chaos. Aaron ran, stumbling through the debris, his helmet cracking with static. He could see the child now, a speck of light amidst giants, standing between destruction and divinity. The Titans fought, like angels. The Necrons fought, like inevitability. And between them, the child lifted his hand.
Light burst outward, brighter than dawn, sweeping across the battlefield. For a moment, everything stopped. The Gauss fire froze in midair. The Titans halted mid-strike. The wind itself seemed to kneel. Then the child spoke, not aloud, but in every mind at once. "You are both the same, you and they, builders of eternity, prisoners of your own perfection." The Necron's eyes dimmed. The Titans trembled. Even Aaron felt it, the crushing realization that the voice was not speaking to the combatants, but to creation itself. "You wanted immortality. You wanted to be more than flesh. But you forgot that even gods must bleed." The light intensified. The Titans began to melt, not as flesh burns, but as memory fades. Their forms unraveled into luminous dust, drifting upward like sparks from a dying fire. The Necrons froze, their bodies shuddering as their metallic shells cracked and dissolved into the same light. Within moments, the entire battlefield glowed with 1,000,000 drifting embers, each one whispering as it vanished. Aaron fell to his knees, his visor fractured from the glare. Through the distortion, he saw the child standing alone amidst the ruin, face calm, eyes infinite. "You can't," Aaron gasped. "You can't erase them. They're alive." The child turned, and for the first time there was sorrow in his expression. "No, Aaron Kala. They were never alive. They were remnants, reflections of choices that refused to die. I am only giving them peace." The words broke something in Aaron. "Peace? You call this peace?" He gestured to the dissolving giants, the fading storm, the silence that followed. "You're unmaking the world." The child stepped closer, his glow dimming until only his eyes shone in the dark.
"The world was never yours to keep," he said softly. "It was a promise broken before it was made." Then he looked past Erend toward Elise, the direction of Elise. "The veil weakens. Soon all that is divided will see itself, and then you will understand." Before Erend could speak again, the child was gone. The light faded, the storm ended. Only silence remained, thick, heavy, absolute. Erend rose slowly, his knees trembling. Around him lay the remnants of miracles and nightmares, now indistinguishable from each other. The air smelled of metal and ash. He looked up. For the first time in weeks, the sky cleared.
And there, beyond the horizon, a golden beam pierced the clouds, straight and pure, descending upon a distant world. Elis, the shrine world. Aaron fell to his knees again, not in worship, but in exhaustion. He understood now why the Ordo Sepulchrum had warned him. The child was not bringing salvation. He was unraveling the illusion that mankind had called faith. And yet, deep inside, a part of him still followed, because in that unmaking there was truth, and truth, however terrible, was all that remained. He whispered into the wind, voice cracked and low. "Emperor, if you ever loved us, then love us enough to let us see what we've become." The ash shifted gently around him, forming faint ripples that glowed gold for a single heartbeat, then faded. Aaron stood, turned east, and began to walk. Each step carried him closer to Elis, where gods bled and faith was made flesh. The wind howled once, then fell still. And far behind him, buried beneath the silence, a single whisper remained, faint, childlike, eternal. "The veil remembers you, Erend Kalar." The shrine world of Elis floated in the void like a candle in the endless night, a world consecrated by blood and fire, where every mountain was carved into the likeness of saints, and every city was a prayer written in stone. Once, pilgrims from across the segmentum had come here to kneel beneath its golden spires. Now, the heavens above it burned with silent auroras, and the prayers had gone unanswered for 1,000 years. When Erend Kalar reached its surface, he understood why. The air was still, too still. No wind, no birds, not even the hum of distant manufactoria. The soil itself glowed faintly, as if light had seeped from beneath the crust and could not die. The ruins of basilicas stretched across the horizon, their towers bent like the fingers of a corpse reaching for the stars. Statues of the emperor lay shattered, their eyes hollow, their hands open in eternal supplication. It was beautiful, and it was dead. He walked for days through the silence, guided only by the beam of light that fell from the heavens, a column of gold piercing the clouds, illuminating a single structure at the planet's heart, the Grand Cathedra of Elise. It was said to be older than most worlds, its stones blessed by the first High Lords of Terra. Within its vaults burned an eternal flame, kept alive by generations of priests who had long since turned to dust. Now the flame was gone, but something else burned in its place. As Erend approached, he felt it before he saw it. A pulse, rhythmic and alive, echoing through the ground and into his bones. He followed it through the shattered archways, past frescoes of long-dead saints whose eyes wept rust. At the center of the nave, the floor had split open, revealing a chasm that glowed with golden light. And standing at its edge, barefoot, haloed by radiance, was the child. He had not aged. His eyes were still those of the innocent and the infinite, his skin still carved by the living Aquila. Around him, the air shimmered like the surface of a dream.
You followed, the child said, his voice carrying no echo, yet filling every corner of the cathedral. Erend dropped to one knee. I didn't have a choice. There is always a choice. The words cut deeper than any blade. Erend looked up, his voice breaking. You destroyed them, the Titans, the Necron. You're unmaking everything. The child's gaze softened. No, I am revealing what was already broken. The Imperium has built its faith on bones too long buried. It must see what it worships before it can be free. Erend rose slowly, taking a step closer. And what is it we worship? The child turned toward the chasm. The light within it shifted, showing shapes that twisted and reformed like molten gold. Faces, planets, armies, all burning, all kneeling, all consumed by their own devotion. You worship memory, the child said, the memory of a man who tried to save you and in doing so became the cage you cannot leave. The Emperor, Erend whispered. The child nodded. Once, he sought to end faith, to build an age of reason and light. But the warp does not forget. When his body fell and his will burned across the galaxy, the prayers of billions remade him. He became what he despised, a god, not by choice, but by love.
Erend stared into the chasm, and for a moment, he thought he saw it. The golden throne, not as a relic, but as a wound, pulsing with the weight of 10,000 years of worship. Every prayer, every martyrdom, every act of devotion had poured into it, feeding the corpse that was once a man. He is dying, the child said softly, and in his dying dream, he made me. Erend's blood turned to ice. You're his son? The child smiled sadly. I am his thought, his regret, the part of him that still remembers what it means to be human. Silence filled the cathedral. Dust drifted through beams of golden light. What do you want from me? Erend asked. The child's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was pleading in them. To bear witness, to tell them what comes next. The chasm pulsed again, brighter now, and from its depths came whispers, thousands of voices speaking in unity, each one carrying both faith and despair. The sound was beautiful, unbearable, holy. Erend stepped closer, drawn toward the edge. What's down there? The truth, the child said. The soul of mankind, crying out to its maker. He raised his hand, and the light surged upward, swallowing the cathedral in radiance. Erend shielded his eyes, but through his fingers he saw visions, fleeting, fragmented, divine. Cities burning under skies of iron, angels falling into oceans of blood. Men and women kneeling before broken icons, whispering prayers to the dead. And above it all, the faint image of a figure bound to a throne of gold. His face both human and infinite, his eyes closed in endless suffering. Then, beneath it, a whisper that froze Erend's heart. Do not awaken me. The light shattered. Erend fell to the ground, gasping, the air thick with dust and smoke. The chasm had closed. The child stood where it had been. His glow dimmed to a flicker. You saw it, he said quietly. Now you understand. Erend rose unsteadily, rage burning through the awe. Understand, I saw damnation. I saw the Emperor suffering, and you did nothing. The child's expression was unreadable. Would you have me end him? Or save him? Would you even know the difference? Erend stopped. He didn't have an answer. None of them ever did. The child walked past him, toward the broken doors. Come, the veil is almost gone. Soon there will be no faith left, only truth. And truth will decide whether humanity deserves to live. Erend followed, though his heart was heavy with dread. As they stepped out into the light of the dying sun, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Far beyond the mountains, the sky tore open, revealing a wound of burning stars. Something was coming through. The child looked up, his face illuminated by the golden fire of the heavens. "The Emperor dreams," he said, "and his dream is ending." The wound in the sky grew wider each passing hour. It shimmered above Elise like an unhealed scar, bleeding gold and black into the heavens. Every tremor of its light carried the sound of a choir that was not made by throats. Hymns woven from memory, screaming through the air like echoes of creation itself. Erend followed the child through the ruins, his boots crunching over shattered icons and the bones of pilgrims long turned to dust. With every step, he felt the weight of history pressing closer, as if the entire planet were exhaling the breath it had held for millennia. The child did not look back. They walked through the skeletal remains of cathedrals where stained glass still clung to the walls, fractured and half buried in sand. The painted saints looked down upon them through shattered halos. Some wept light, others bled shadow. Finally, they came to the inner sanctum of the grand cathedra, a cavernous chamber hollowed out beneath the world's crust, its ceiling lost to darkness. The air was thick with incense and ozone. Dozens of mechanical sensors floated along the walls, still obedient to the programming of priests who had been dead for centuries. At the center of the sanctum stood a single throne. It was carved not from gold, but from bone, the vertebrae of something vast, perhaps human, perhaps not. Coiled cables ran through its structure like veins, feeding into a glowing sphere above it, suspended in the air by unseen force. Within the sphere, light pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heart that refused to stop beating. The child approached it with reverence. "This," he said, "is where it began."
Erend could only whisper, "What is it?" "The echo of the first prayer," the child said, "the Emperor's voice, before he was worshipped." The air around the sphere shimmered, and Erend heard whispers, distant, ancient, aching with grief. He could not understand the words, but their meaning pierced him nonetheless, a father's plea to a dying species, a cry that had never stopped echoing through time. "He loved you," the child said softly, turning toward Erend, "but his love was imperfect. It tried to save you without allowing you to change." The sphere pulsed again, and for a moment Erend thought he saw images within it. The Emperor standing upon Terra's walls, his armor cracked and blackened, his face shrouded by light. Around him the legions knelt, their eyes burning with both devotion and despair. Then darkness swallowed the vision, and Erend saw something else, a fragment of the Emperor's mind, cast adrift in the warp, splitting into countless shards of consciousness. Each shard fell upon a different world, whispering into the dreams of mankind. Saints, prophets, monsters, all born from the same source. The child stepped closer to the sphere, placing his small hand upon its surface. Light flowed into his palm, and for an instant, the golden aquila carved into his chest flared bright enough to hurt the eyes. "I am one of those shards," he said quietly, "the last one he allowed to remember what pain feels like." Aaron took a step back, his voice trembling. "If you're part of him, then why are you tearing everything down? The faith, the walls, the very soul of the Imperium. Why?" The child's expression turned almost tender. "Because faith built without truth is only another cage. You worship his silence. You kill in his name. You call that devotion." He turned his eyes upward to the trembling wound in the sky. The bone throne cracked, dust falling like snow. The sphere pulsed faster, heartbeats accelerating. Aaron shouted over the rising hum, "If he wakes, what happens?" The child's answer was a whisper that cut through the noise. "Everything ends." A sudden burst of energy surged from the sphere, hurling Aaron backward. He crashed against the stone steps, his vision blurring. The child stood motionless in the storm of golden light, his small frame outlined against the radiance. "Stop!" Aaron cried. "You'll destroy yourself."
But the child's voice was distant, almost serene. "I was never meant to last. I am only the echo of his mercy. And mercy cannot live forever in a world built on fear." The sphere shattered. Light flooded the chamber. Aaron screamed as it pierced his eyes, burning not his body, but his memory. He saw flashes, thousands of lives, billions of prayers, the rise and fall of empires, each one dissolving into the same blinding truth. The Emperor's voice, not the myth, not the god, but the man, filled his mind. "Forgive me. I only wanted to give them peace." The light faded. The world fell silent. Aaron lay on the cold floor, his breath ragged. The sphere was gone. The throne lay in pieces, and the child stood before him, still glowing but dimmer now, his light flickering like the last ember of a dying star. He looked older, weary, mortal. The veil is almost gone. The dream unravels. Aaron crawled toward him, voice raw. "Then stop it, please. Humanity isn't ready for truth." The child knelt beside him, their eyes meeting. "No one ever is." Then he placed his hand upon Aaron's chest. Warmth surged through him, flooding his veins, washing away the pain. "You will see the end, and you will tell them what they were." The light within the child's body flared once more, pure, golden, endless. It poured through the cracks of the broken sanctum, rising toward the sky like a beacon. Aaron tried to reach out, but his hand passed through light. Then the world split open. The light tore across the heavens like the scream of creation. It was not fire nor storm, but revelation, a brilliance so pure that it seemed to burn through the fabric of matter itself. The wound above Elias widened into infinity, its edges bleeding starlight. For a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to turn its gaze upon this single world. Aaron Kalar clung to the fractured stones of the sanctum as the planet trembled beneath him. The sky was no longer sky, it was memory, unfolding. He saw fragments of time bleeding through one another, cities rising and falling, angels turning into beasts, faiths born and forgotten in the same breath. The past and the present wove together like strands of fire, and at the center of it all, the child. His body had become translucent, light flowing through him like molten glass. His hair drifted weightlessly, as though gravity itself no longer dared touch him. He stood at the heart of the storm, one hand raised toward the golden wound in the sky, the other pressed against his own chest. "Erend," he said, though his voice was no longer human. It was the sound of wind across eternity, the echo of every prayer ever spoken. "Do you see it now?" Erend struggled to his feet, shielding his eyes from the brilliance. "I see too much." "Then you see the truth." Above them, the light coalesced into form, vast, incomprehensible, terrible. The image of the Emperor flickered across the firmament. His face, neither old nor young, his armor cracked, his eyes closed as if in endless mourning. Around him, the galaxy swirled like dust in the wake of a breath. But this was not the god Erend had prayed to. This was the man beneath the myth, the weary father of a species that had turned his dream into a prison. The child's voice trembled. "He cannot bear the weight any longer. Every soul that calls his name binds him tighter. Every plea for mercy feeds the chains of his divinity." Erend shook his head, tears burning down his soot-covered cheeks. "You're saying faith itself is killing him?" "Yes, faith built from fear, from obedience, from the worship of silence." The child's glow flickered. The Imperium's greatest sin was not doubt, but devotion. The words tore through Erend's heart. He thought of the men who had died on Helios, the priests who had burned for purity, the children who had prayed to statues while their cities starved. All of it, offered to a dying god who had never asked for worship. The wound above them pulsed once, sending waves of golden fire cascading through the atmosphere. Whole continents cracked under its pressure. Oceans boiled. From orbit, it must have looked like Elias was aflame, a world being remade in the image of Revelation.
The child turned toward Erend, his eyes like twin suns. "You must decide now. The veil will not hold. When it tears completely, all of humanity will see the Emperor as he truly is. The dream will end." Erend's voice was hoarse. "And if it ends? Then mankind will be free, free to build, to fall, to love without worship. Or it will be consumed by the truth it begged to see." Erend's pulse thundered in his skull. "And you? What happens to you?" The child smiled faintly, light pouring from the cracks in his skin. "I was never meant to stay. When he wakes, I will return to him, as all things do." The sky screamed. The golden image of the Emperor flickered, fracturing into 1,000 shards of light. The storm above became a cathedral of radiance, stretching from horizon to horizon, and from within it came a sound unlike any other. Not anger, not pain, but a sigh. The sigh of a god remembering that he was once a man. The child spread his arms wide, light cascading from his fingertips. "This is it," he said softly, "the moment of reckoning. Faith or truth, blindness or mercy." Erend took a step forward. The ground cracked beneath him, molten light spilling from the fissures. "If I choose faith," he whispered, "we stay chained. But if I choose truth, then the chains break," said the child, "and you may not survive what lies beyond them." The choice tore him apart. Every memory of his life, his comrades, his prayers, the banners of Helios, his sister's final breath, burned through his mind. All of it built on belief. All of it held together by the illusion that there was purpose beyond the suffering. But now, he looked into the child's eyes and saw no God, no angel, only sorrow. And in that sorrow, something human. Erend lowered his head, then let it break. The child nodded once. So be it. He placed his glowing hand over his heart.
The aquila carved into his chest flared one last time, brighter than all the suns of the galaxy combined. Then his body dissolved into pure light. The radiance shot upward, piercing the wound in the sky, merging with the shattered image of the Emperor. For a moment, everything was still. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the wound closed. The light vanished. Darkness fell. The silence that followed was not the silence of death, but of awe. The air was cool again. The stars returned. And in the distance, Erend could see the faint glimmer of dawn rising over the shattered spires of Elise. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The child was gone. The Emperor's image had faded. The world had survived. But the prayers had stopped. No more hymns. No more whispers through the void. The psychic hum that had filled every corner of human existence for 10,000 years was gone. And for the first time since the birth of the Imperium, the galaxy was silent. Aaron looked to the horizon, the ruins bathed in fragile light. The air smelled of ash and rain. He did not know whether the Emperor lived or died, whether the child had ascended or vanished into nothing. He only knew that humanity was awake, and waking, he realized, was always the hardest part of a dream. He rose slowly, his shadow stretching long behind him. The gold had left the sky, leaving only the faint blue of morning. Somewhere in that silence, he thought he heard a voice, faint, almost tender. "Remember me, not as your god, but as your brother." Aaron turned toward the sound, but there was nothing, only the soft wind whispering through the ruins. He took one last look at the dawn and began to walk. There were no stars in the void that followed, only the slow breathing of a universe that had forgotten to pray. The psychic hum that once bound mankind across light years, the whispers of faith, the hymns of a billion worlds, was gone. Its absence was deafening. The warp, once alive with the echo of worship, was still as glass. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Emperor slept without chains, and across the galaxy, reality shuddered. On worlds where cathedrals once glowed with the light of devotion, candles flickered and died. Vox networks went silent. Astrocaths wept blood as their connection to the Astronomicon, once the Emperor's guiding flame, snuffed out like a candle in storm. Ships were lost, prayers went unanswered, and in the darkness between stars, something new began to stir. Erend Kalaw awoke beneath a ruined sky. The wind that brushed his face was cool and thin, carrying the scent of rain and ozone. The ruins of Elise lay around him, pale beneath the first true dawn the world had seen in centuries. The golden light that once pierced the heavens was gone. Above, the sky was blue, empty. He rose slowly, his armor coated in dust, his lasgun powerless. Only the faint rhythm of his heart kept him anchored in a silence that felt infinite. He had dreamed again of the child, of the Emperor's face dissolving into light, of a voice whispering a single word, "Begin." He did not know what it meant, but he knew what he had to do. He began to walk. For 3 days he wandered the desolation, past the bones of saints and the corpses of statues. Occasionally he found movement, other survivors, faces gaunt and eyes hollow. Some still wore the symbols of the ecclesiarchy, clutching icons that no longer glowed. Others had stripped their faith from their bodies like old skin. They looked at Erend not with reverence, but with fear. "Is it true?" one of them asked. "Is the Emperor gone?" Erend said nothing. They turned away, some screaming, others laughing, the sound brittle and mad. By the 4th day the rains came, soft, cold, and untainted. It was the first clean water Erend had ever tasted.
He fell to his knees beneath the storm, face raised to the sky, and wept, not for salvation, but for the terrible beauty of being alive without certainty. When he awoke again, it was to the sound of thunder, but it was not a storm. The ground trembled, the air vibrated with a low mechanical hum, the unmistakable resonance of orbital descent. He looked up. Through the thinning clouds, he saw them, vast silhouettes descending from the void, their engines trailing fire. Imperial ships, some bore the sigil of the Inquisition, others the unmistakable gold of the Adeptus Custodes. The gods of men had come to reclaim their broken shrine.
And they were not coming in peace. Erend hid among the ruins as the ships landed. Drop pods fell like meteors, cracking open to spill forth soldiers in burnished gold and crimson armor. Vox grills barked orders in the tongue of holy war. Within hours, the ruins of Elis swarmed with life again, not pilgrims or believers, but executioners of faith. He watched as they raised the banners of the Aquila once more, planting them in ash that had not yet cooled. Priests who had survived were dragged into the open, questioned, purged. To the Imperium, faith could not die. It could only be redefined. But there was something wrong with them. The custodians moved like statues animated by memory, their visors dim, their eyes empty. The inquisitors' voices quavered as they spoke scripture, as though reading from a book whose words no longer meant anything. Even the ship's engines groaned in agony, their machine spirits disoriented by the silence of the Astronomicon. They were fragments of a world still trying to believe. Erend overheard their leader, a figure clad in black and gold, face hidden behind a cracked visor. His voice was deep but frayed, the kind that carried too many confessions. "The Emperor's light has gone dark," he said, "but the Imperium must not know. Hope is the weapon we have left." Another officer replied, voice trembling, "And if he truly sleeps?" The Inquisitor turned his gaze toward the horizon. "Then we will keep his corpse standing until the stars burn out. That is our duty." Erend felt the words carve into him. The truth he had seen, the truth the child had shown him, was being buried again beneath ritual and fear. The Imperium could not exist without its god. He clenched his fists. The child had died to break the chains, and already mankind was reforging them. That night, beneath the hollow sky, Erend found himself standing before the ruins of the Grand Cathedra once more. Lightning flickered across the dome. The throne of bone lay in fragments, but at its heart, something glowed faintly beneath the rubble. He dug through the debris with bleeding hands until he found it. A shard of light, small as a child's heart. It pulsed faintly, golden and alive. The remnant, the last spark of the being that had called itself the child. It trembled in his palm, and a whisper filled the air. Not a voice, but a memory. The Emperor dreams still, and all dreams demand an ending. Erend looked toward the sky, where the inquisitorial fleet loomed like a second sun. He knew then what must be done. If the Imperium would not release the dream, he would bring it the ending it feared most. He would awaken the Emperor, not as God, not as myth, as man. The fleet's shadow blotted out the sun. Great ships drifted in low orbit, their hulls scarred from forgotten wars, their vox arrays crackling with the dying echo of commands that no one dared obey. The banners of the Aquila still hung from their prows, but the light that once blessed them had long since dimmed. They were relics now, gilded tombs orbiting a dead god. Aaron watched their descent from the cliffs of the Basilica Plateau. The sky was alive with flame. Drop pods rained down like meteors, spearing the ruins of Illyris with trails of smoke and fury. From their husks poured the Emperor's finest, custodians, inquisitors, sisters of silence, all adorned in gold that no longer gleamed. Their chants were hollow now, a language of obedience without belief. And yet, they moved with purpose, as if duty itself had replaced faith. Aaron held the shard close to his chest, its light pulsing faintly through his armor. It whispered in his dreams, gentle as a child's breath, yet heavy with the weight of eons. He dreams still, but his dream is unraveling. He descended into the ruins, moving like a ghost among the faithful dead. The streets were lined with altars overturned, their sacred oil spilled like blood. A Vox broadcast echoed faintly through the storm. A voice of command carried across the ashes. By decree of the Holy Ordos, the heresy of Illyris shall be extinguished. No record, no relic, no witness shall remain. He paused. That voice, deep, cold, absolute, belonged to the Inquisitor he had seen before. The man who had sworn to preserve hope even in the face of extinction. Now he had become its executioner. Aaron's jaw tightened. The child's prophecy was coming true. Truth had been born, and the Imperium's first act was to strangle it. As he crept through the shattered city, he saw the purge unfold. Monks burned their own scriptures before the custodians could take them. Priests hung themselves upon their altars, leaving behind walls scrawled with messages written in blood. He was man, not God.
Others fought back, not with weapons, but with words, standing in the streets to cry out that the Emperor's dream had ended. They were silenced by bolt fire before their sentences could finish. Aaron pressed on, heart pounding. The shard pulsed faster, glowing brighter the closer he came to the grand cathedral's remains. It was calling him, drawing him. He reached the temple at dusk. The sky bled crimson, the color of a wound refusing to heal. Inside the ruins, firelight danced upon broken marble. The Inquisitor stood at the altar's heart, surrounded by the custodians, their armor reflecting the dying flames like the eyes of angels turned executioners. He was tall, cloaked in black and gold. His voice carried the weight of a confession. The Emperor's silence has broken. We have lost his light, but not his image. And so long as the image endures, so shall the Imperium. He raised his hand, and two custodians dragged forth a prisoner, a frail woman wrapped in the robes of a confessor. Her eyes glowed faintly with psychic fire. "Do you deny the divinity of him on Terra?" the Inquisitor demanded. Her voice trembled, but her gaze did not waver. "I do not deny him. I remember him. He was not God. He was mercy." The Inquisitor's face hardened. "Then you are a blasphemy." He drew his bolt pistol and fired once. Her body fell, crumpling in silence. The sound echoed through the ruins like thunder. Aaron stepped forward before he could think. His voice tore through the chamber. "Stop!" Every helm turned toward him. The Inquisitor regarded him for a long, cold moment. Another survivor. He gestured, "Disarm him." The custodians advanced, weapons raised, but before they could reach him, the shard flared in Aaron's hand, golden light bursting through the shadows. The air rippled with heat, and every torch in the chamber flickered and died. The Inquisitor froze. "What is that?" Aaron's voice shook. "What you've been killing to bury. The last fragment of his truth." The custodians halted, their movements uncertain, as if some old memory had awoken within them. The Inquisitor's hand trembled over his weapon. "Blasphemy," he whispered. "You carry corruption." Aaron stepped closer, holding the shard high.
Its light reflected off the Inquisitor's mask, and beneath the gold, Aaron saw a tear tracing down his scarred cheek. "Look at it," Aaron said softly. "This is what he left behind. Not power, not command, compassion." For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then the Inquisitor's voice broke, almost human. "You would have me believe the Emperor sought peace, after all he wrought?" "I don't ask you to believe," Aaron said, "only to see." He opened his palm and the shard floated upward, pulsing like a heart reborn. Light spilled across the ruins, washing over the custodians, the corpses, the shattered icons. One by one, the golden warriors lowered their weapons. Their visors dimmed, the flames around them went out. And then the shard spoke, not in words, but in the raw pulse of memory. Aaron saw visions flash through his mind, not of war, but of creation. The Emperor walking among the first colonies of mankind, his voice teaching children to read by the light of dying stars, his hands building, not destroying. The Inquisitor fell to his knees, clutching his head. "No," he whispered, "he cannot have wanted this. We are his order, his legacy." The light intensified, the ground trembled. Aaron whispered, "Maybe he never wanted to be remembered, only understood." The Inquisitor raised his eyes to the shard, tears gleaming in the flickering light. "Then what are we now?" Aaron met his gaze. "Lost, but free." The shard flared once more, brighter than the dawn. Outside, the fleet began to scream. The scream of the fleet rolled across the heavens like the roar of a dying god. Aaron looked up through the ruined dome as light cascaded down from orbit, not the red of bombardment, nor the white of cleansing flame, but something deeper, older, gold. The shard's radiance had reached beyond the planet. It pulsed in rhythm with the beating of the galaxy itself, and as it did, the ships above began to twist against their own will. Their machine spirits howled. Vox channels burst into static and song. The Aquila symbols on their hulls flared like burning suns before melting into liquid light. The custodians fell to their knees, their armor flickering with distorted prayers. The Inquisitor's voice cracked through the chaos, half terror, half awe. "What have you done?" Aaron's voice was low, trembling, but resolute. "I didn't do anything. He is remembering." The shard floated higher, shedding light that turned the air itself to glass. Within that glow, Aaron saw movement, shadows swirling, forms emerging, faces from every corner of humanity's past. Warriors, saints, scholars, heretics, countless souls, all bound by the same memory of the one they had worshipped, cursed, loved, and feared. And through them, the voice returned. "I dreamed of perfection, and in dreaming, I forgot what I was." The words shook the stones. The great banners of the Aquila hanging over the ruins disintegrated, turning to dust in the light. The custodians fell prostrate, their voices cracking into cries that no longer sounded like prayer, but like confession. The Inquisitor clawed at his chestplate, tearing it open to reveal the half-burned sigil of the Emperor etched into his flesh. "We carried you," he shouted into the storm. "We killed for you. Do not abandon us now." The reply was neither gentle nor cruel, only true. "You abandoned yourselves when you forgot how to be human." The sound became light. The light became heat. The world trembled as the veil between material and immaterial tore open once more, not as a wound, but as a sunrise. The warp bled through reality, not in chaos this time, but in harmony, a vast sea of color,
vast enough to drown despair itself. Aaron staggered backward as his mind filled with visions, Terra aflame with remembrance, 1,000 worlds flickering like dying candles. Every soul in the galaxy felt it. The last shadow of the Emperor's will stretching out, no longer commanding, but releasing. The golden light enveloped everything. The Inquisitor's mask fell away, revealing a man who was both terrified and newborn. "If this is truth," he whispered, "then everything we were was lie." Aaron placed a hand on his shoulder. Then perhaps the lie was necessary to reach the truth. Above them, the fleet began to break apart, not in explosion, but in transfiguration. The ships dissolved into streams of golden dust, cascading down through the atmosphere like rain made of light. It fell upon the ruins, the corpses, the broken icons, and for the first time in history, nothing burned.
Everything grew. From the ash, grass began to rise. Pale, trembling shoots illuminated by the last gleam of divinity. The planet that had been a shrine became soil again. Elis, the world of prayer, was being reborn as a world of silence. And in that silence, Aaron understood what the child had meant. Faith had to die for wonder to live. He fell to his knees as the shard began to dim, its radiance sinking into the earth like a seed. It pulsed one last time before vanishing completely, leaving only warmth in the air and a single echo in his heart. The dream is over. Wake. The Inquisitor bowed his head. Then what are we now? Aaron stared at the horizon, where the golden clouds began to part, revealing a dawn that was neither divine nor damned. "Human," he said. The wind carried the word across the ruins, and for the first time, the world did not flinch. He walked for days through the newborn plains, past the empty shells of faith that had once been cathedrals. Sometimes he could hear voices in the distance, the quiet laughter of children, the songs of those who had not yet learned to be afraid. Once he found a cracked piece of marble with the Emperor's image carved into it. The eyes were gone, worn smooth by time. Aaron traced the outline of the face with his fingertips, then buried it gently in the soil. He did not pray. He simply stood there, beneath the open sky, and let the silence fill him. Far above Elis, beyond the reach of mortal eyes, the warp shimmered with a new color. The golden throne no longer burned. Where the Emperor's psychic beacon had once stood, there was now a calm, endless void, and within that void, a faint glimmer of something that had not existed for 10,000 years. Peace. And somewhere in that peace, the echo of a child's laughter drifted like a forgotten hymn.
In the age that followed, there were no sermons, no psalms, only silence. A silence vast enough to hold the echo of everything humanity had ever believed. The Imperium fractured like stained glass under a single blow. Whole systems went dark, their governors driven mad by the absence of the Astronomicon's voice. Pilgrims turned into wanderers. Priests became storytellers. The word faith itself began to fade from language, as if the galaxy was trying to unlearn it. And yet, something endured. On Elis, where gold had once devoured the sky, a city began to rise from the soil. Not a shrine, not a fortress, a place of remembrance. It had no walls, no throne, no icon of worship. At its heart stood only a single figure carved from plain stone, a man sitting upon a broken step, his face turned upward, his hands open, unarmed. Aaron Kalar built it with his own hands. Years had passed since the ascension of ruin. His hair had turned to ash, and his body bore the scars of 1,000 forgotten days. But his eyes still held that same haunted light, the glow of one who had looked upon gods and found only man. He tended the city in silence. Farmers came, then masons, then children. They asked him what this place was called. And he smiled, Terra's reflection. A beginning that remembers its end. The people did not pray. They listened. Sometimes, when the wind passed through the valley, it carried a sound, faint and distant, like a heartbeat made of sunlight. The old called it the emperor's ghost. The young called it the breath of the world. But to Erend, it was simply memory. The last whisper of a being who had once tried to save everything and became its prison instead. At night, he would climb the hill that overlooked the plains, sit beside the weathered statue, and speak into the dark. I don't know if you can still hear me, but if you can, we're learning. Slowly, painfully, but we're learning. The stars above him shimmered, quiet and unjudging. Elsewhere, far beyond the reach of Elise's reborn light, the void remained restless. The warp, stripped of its divine anchor, began to heal in strange and unpredictable ways. Demons starved in silence, their screams reduced to whispers. The gods of corruption bled into one another, their boundaries thinning until only the faintest shadows of their forms remained. The galaxy could not exist without faith forever. In the lost sectors, where the void was deepest, a new whisper began to spread. No name, no image. Only a presence, soft, human, unbearably kind. It came to the dying, the forsaken, the outcast. It did not command, it comforted. Wherever it passed, the dead did not rise as soldiers or martyrs, but as light.
They called it the Quiet Dawn. Some said it was the Emperor reborn, finally freed from the throne. Others said it was the child, the fragment of compassion that had seeded itself into the warp to guide humanity's dream once more. Erend did not know. He only knew the truth the child had shown him on that final day, that no god could ever save man from himself. Only man could do that. He was an old man now. His hands shook as he carved the final line into the base of the statue. He was man, and that was enough. When he was done, he sat back and watched the sunrise spill across the horizon. The light caught the statue's face, and for an instant, it seemed alive. Not divine, not distant, simply alive. Erend smiled. That's all you ever wanted, isn't it? To be seen without worship. The wind stirred again, gentle as breath. And then from the stillness came a whisper, faint as a dream remembered just before waking. Yes. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since Helios, since the Titans, since the child, he felt peace. The silence no longer frightened him. It was not emptiness, it was promise. He leaned against the stone, the sunlight warm upon his face, and let his heartbeat slow. The last sound he heard before sleep claimed him was the laughter of children, echoing through the city that no longer needed gods. Far above, in the cold dark where stars watched in eternal quiet, a flicker of golden light crossed the void, brief, gentle, human. A memory passing into legend. Night fell gently upon Elise, and the stars, once drowned in the psychic glare of the Astronomicon, shone pure again. They were not divine lights, not omens of fate, but the distant suns of other worlds, other stories. Each one whispered the same fragile truth. Existence was small, and that smallness was sacred. Aaron Kalar walked the silent streets of the city he had built, now alive with the breath of those who no longer prayed. Laughter carried through the dusk. Lanterns flickered in doorways. The people were no longer kneeling. They were living. And though he rarely spoke of what came before, the memory of the emperor lingered in every kindness, every act of mercy, every moment when a man helped another to stand. That was how humanity remembered its God, not in worship, but in imitation. But beyond the walls, something stirred. Aaron felt it first as a tremor beneath his boots, subtle as a heartbeat buried in the stone. He stopped, listening. The air was still. Then, from the east, came a low, steady hum, not the voice of faith, but the deep metallic tone of engines older than history. The Imperium had found them again. At dawn, ships appeared on the horizon, cutting through the upper atmosphere in formation. They were different now, smaller, darker, their sigils stripped of ornament, their purpose sharpened to a single word: order. When they landed upon the plains, Aaron went alone to meet them. The soldiers who emerged were not like those he remembered. Their armor was unpainted. Their banners were blank. No symbols, no litanies. They called themselves the Astra Remnants, survivors of a dying Imperium who refused to speak the Emperor's name, but who still marched in his shadow. Their commander was a woman, her face hidden behind a translucent helm that shimmered faintly with gold. When she spoke, her voice was low, not cruel, but weary. Aaron Kalar of Ellis, she said, by decree of the Remnant Council, you are to come with us. The galaxy has broken, and you carry knowledge we need. Aaron studied her visor. You've come for the truth, he said. We've come for what keeps us from falling apart. Call it truth if you must. He hesitated, then nodded. There's nothing here for me to keep, only what I've learned. They led him aboard their ship, a vessel stripped of ornament, its walls bare metal, its corridors humming with a low, mournful pulse. Where once there would have been icons of the Aquila, there were only empty recesses in the bulkheads, as if the ghosts of faith had been scraped clean. In the command chamber, the officers waited. Scholars, soldiers, psychers, all faces drawn tight by hunger and disbelief. The commander gestured to the void beyond the viewport, where the stars burned faintly. The warp is changing, she said. Travel is unstable. The old maps are gone. Some worlds blink out and never return. We found places where time has folded in on itself. Entire planets frozen in prayer. Others, she paused, where the dead walk, but not as chaos would have them. They speak in one voice. They call it the dawn. Aaron's heart tightened. It's not death. It's the remnant of what we were. The Emperor's compassion, freed from the throne, wandering through the warp like light through fog. The room fell silent. The psychers looked at him with hollow eyes. One whispered, "Then he still lives."
Aaron shook his head. No, he is. That's not the same. The commander studied him. And what do you believe? He smiled faintly. That belief is a mirror. When we stop staring into it, we might finally see what's behind us. No one spoke for a long while. The engines hummed. The void beyond the glass seemed to listen. Finally, the commander turned away. There's a world we cannot reach, she said. A world at the edge of the segmentum pacificus. The old charts call it Sol. Terra. Aaron's breath caught. She continued, something stirs there. Vox signals from the warp, rhythmic, repeating. like breathing. He closed his eyes. The shard was gone, but he could still feel its warmth in his chest, faint, like a candle burning far beneath the ocean. The Emperor, still dreaming. Erend looked out the viewport at the cold tapestry of the stars. "Then you're not here to rebuild the Imperium," he said softly. "You're here to wake him." The commander's silence was answer enough. He rose slowly. "If you wake him as a god, you'll destroy everything we've learned. But if you wake him as a man—" He hesitated, feeling the weight of what the child had once told him. "Then maybe we have a chance." The commander's gaze flickered. "Will you help us?" Erend's voice was tired but steady. "I'll take you to him, but I won't help you pray." As their ship rose from Elis and pierced the atmosphere, he looked down one last time at the city, his city, bathed in the light of morning. No temples, no idols. Only the living moving through their days, unafraid of the quiet. He whispered a single word to the wind that followed them upward. "Remember." Then the stars swallowed him whole. The ship broke through the last currents of the warp, and there it was, Terra, the cradle and the tomb of mankind. From orbit, it no longer glowed with the gold of devotion. Its surface was dark, clouded, cracked by centuries of siege and sanctified war. The palace still stood, vast, broken, magnificent, its towers like the ribs of a dead god reaching toward the stars. The Astronomicon was gone, and in its place pulsed a quiet, rhythmic light, faint as breath. It was not power, it was life. As they descended, the fleet fell silent. No hymns, no transmissions, only awe. Every man and woman aboard knew what they were seeing, the heart of everything, finally unguarded. Erend stood at the viewing deck, his reflection framed against the dying world below. "It's smaller than I remember," he whispered. The commander beside him nodded. "Everything becomes small when the light goes out." When they landed upon the scorched plains outside the Eternity Gate, no banners greeted them, no arnies. The air was still, save for the faint wind that carried the smell of dust and time. The gate itself, once sealed by custodians, blessed by 10,000 psalms, was open. Erend stepped forward. His footsteps echoed through the silent corridors of the imperial palace. The walls were blackened, scarred by fire, yet here and there faint traces of murals remained, the faces of heroes, saints, and martyrs. But all of them were fading. At the end of the hall stood the golden throne. It was no longer gold. The light that had once poured from it like the wrath of the sun was now soft, pale, human. The machinery that had once devoured 1,000 psychers a day was still. The air shimmered faintly with residual heat, and upon the throne sat a man. He was neither corpse nor god. His armor was cracked, his flesh scarred, his face pale beneath the shadow of age. His eyes, closed for 10,000 years, fluttered open. They were not divine, they were tired. The entire chamber seemed to inhale.
Erend fell to one knee. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times. The awakening, the apocalypse, the final revelation, but none of it prepared him for the silence that followed. The Emperor spoke, and his voice was softer than Erend had ever imagined. "Why do you kneel?" Erend trembled. "Because I am afraid." The Emperor's gaze was calm. "So am I." He rose from the throne, and the ancient cable snapped like dry vines. Each movement released motes of golden dust that drifted through the air like the ghosts of forgotten prayers. He looked around the hall, at the murals, the machines, the shattered icons of his own image. "So much of me," he murmured, "and yet none of it was mine." Erend could not speak. The Emperor stepped down from the dais, the echo of his footsteps like the heartbeat of a dying star. "I have dreamed long enough," he said, and the dream became the cage. Erend swallowed. "Then the Imperium?"
A faint, weary smile crossed the emperor's face. A monument to fear, built by love, sustained by lies. He turned toward the open gate, the light of the dying sun spilling across his armor. But I do not condemn them, for I was their first lie. Erend rose slowly. Why wake now? The emperor looked back at him, and in that gaze was no omnipotence, no judgment, only the infinite sorrow of one who had seen every possible ending. Because I remember what it means to be human.
The wind rose, catching the dust, the light, the fragments of armor. The emperor's body dissolved into radiance, scattering into the horizon like the breaking of dawn. When it was over, only the throne remained, empty, cracked, silent. Erend approached it and placed his hand upon the armrest. It was warm. He was never gone. He was only waiting for us to stop worshiping him. The commander stood beside him, visor lifted, tears streaking her face. And what now? Erend looked toward the open gate, where sunlight touched the ash-strewn plains. Now, he said, we remember that we were gods once, not because of power, but because we could choose. They left the palace together, the sound of their footsteps fading into the hum of the wind. Above them, the sky shimmered with faint gold, not divine, but alive, the light of man. Years later, pilgrims would still come to Terra, not to kneel, but to walk. They called the palace the Empty Heart, and within its halls grew gardens fed by the dust of a god who had finally rested. There were no priests, no saints, only caretakers who tended the silence, teaching their children that divinity had never been found in heaven, but in the courage to forgive. And sometimes, when the dawn broke over the ruins, the sunlight fell across the throne just so, and the air shimmered, faint and golden, as though remembering the man who once dreamed the stars into being. And in that silence, the universe learned that to be human, truly, painfully, beautifully human, was the only prayer that had ever mattered.